ODM, despite being mistreated. I think you need to understand one thing. BBI rallies, while ODM is trying to pretend that they are the owners, BBI belongs to Kenyans. That's why, apart from us attending them, I think you've seen Kipchumba Murkomen also attending. Have you questioned them? Have you given them part of the orange? And finally, I would like you to know that by the history of this country on governance issues and on proper running of national affairs, I would say that when we were in government with ODM, we ran a better government than Jubilee. So I think I'm associating with the right side.
Thanyou.
You are the one associating with the people who are ruling this country.
Thank you.
Let me have my say on this orange.
We finalize with Otiende on the orange, please.
You're asking why Bonnie Khalwale has taken your orange. It's because Bonnie has a natural affinity to the Orange Party.
No, I passed it.
Natural affinity to the Orange Party. So it is natural for him to take an orange and donate it here and there. Because where he is, he's merely on a sojourn. He will come back home. But, it's kind of a contradiction to hear Aaron Cheruiyot and Bonnie Khalwale lament so much about dissent and then attack the leader of Ford Kenya and ANC for supporting BBI. Isn't it a contradiction merely because you think that they should join your wing of Jubilee that is opposed to BBI? How do you condemn intolerance and then advocate it at the same time? But if Aaron Cheruiyot was a good scholar in history, he would know that there is no part of this country that has a longer history of political dissent than where I come from. At any one time since before independence and after independence and to date, you will always find that there's a mainstream thinking, but there's always an alternative thinking. That alternative thinking goes back to the days of Tomboy and Jaramogi. It goes all the way into as recently as when we were all on this side. And my own predecessor in Rarieda was on your side. And he would still say his thing. The fact that most people don't agree with him at the time is irrelevant. Today, we have members of parliament who do not belong to ODM. We have Honorable Masara, who's an independent, Shakil Shabir, who's an independent. We have Olaga Luoch in Fort Kenya. And they're still, it's okay. So it is wrong to attack those who have chosen to come back, like Jacoyo Midio, my own sister Elizabeth Ongoro, by merely saying that now they've come back either for what Bonnie, very dangerously, claims to be reasons for wanting to be laundered, or because it's for some other, pressure. I think we must allow people to exercise their independent thought and will, to come back and will, to live at will, at least for me.
Thank you.
Hopefully, Jacoyo will not be calling me a member of the Sultanate anymore. So I am quite happy. We will now be on the same boat on this one.
Right, thank you. Thank you. Let's wrap up that particular discussion on political parties. And of course, we know also there is a bill that is on the floor of the House, the political parties bill. You talked about funding, and I think that has been also a bigger component on how this winner takes all, like ODM, or Jubilee when it comes to the funding as well. Maybe you can just put us to the know briefly, members of parliament, if there is anything on, because I know there's a sort of a bill in the House right now that seeks to tackle the issue of funding, briefly.
I'm not privy to the bill yet, but yes, I think the current sharing of political parties fund is undemocratic. It's not useful for this country, because what happens now is such that they have made it so difficult for many parties to access the fund. Even parties that have representation in various assemblies in the country cannot access the fund. And yet, the whole idea about political parties funding, which by the way I need to remind the country, that the initial bill was actually brought in by the former chairman of Ford Kenya, Honorable Muskari Kombo. They are the initiators of political parties funding. But right now, what we are dealing with has been distorted to the extent that you find all the money goes to one or two parties. Yeah. And yet there are many other parties, not just in the National Assembly and the Senate, but in various other assemblies in the country. I think that needs to be looked at carefully, because somebody imagines that then they are reducing the number of political parties in the country. I don't think financing should be the way to reduce the number of political parties. There are better ways to do that. I believe that the time when political parties funding was being equitably shared by political parties, there was vibrant democracy. You could see that with the kind of debate we engaged in and with the kind of people we had. But right now, with the money just going to two parties, you can see what's going on in the country. While the rest of the parties are so disenfranchised to the point that they cannot implement their activities effectively, because then you have to rely on individuals' generosity to be able to run your affairs. And that is not, that was the whole idea of political parties funding, so that a party stops being a property of an individual who funds it. But if we continue this way, then yes, and Kenyans should be very worried, because then we are reducing this country to an ODM Jubilee affair. And in my view, both those parties are dysfunctional. And if we reduce the country to be at the mercy of these two parties, we are doing a disservice to democracy.
Right, thank
you. I think during our time in Senate, in the last session, Boni Khalwale was one of the most passionate contributors to that issue. I remember he contributed to that matter.
They came up with a
at length. And because I think from what I followed the discussion that time when you contributed to it, Boni. And the issue was I think narrowed down to what you'd call the terms and conditions, or the threshold that has been set for a political party to qualify to be a beneficiary of the funding. And so you find largely to what Eseli is saying, it becomes, in quotes, unfair. And for that matter, creates a monopoly of the big parties gobbling up all the funds, not necessarily to promote democracy as it is supposed to be, but to fund political expansion of those parties. I think that was the debate. It would be better off, probably rationalized. One would want to wonder, then how will it play out at this time when we are also agitating to have a parliamentary system? How would that play out? It would be a big discussion. Yeah.
Right.
Can I respond to the question?
Just a moment. Yes, Khalwale, briefly.
I really regret some of the many things that I did in Parliament. But one such a thing that I regret is when I moved an amendment to lower the threshold of the requirement for a political party to access the political party funding. Because in so doing, I started thinking contrary to what Muskari Kombo had envisaged, i.e. to try and kill the so-called briefcase parties. You might like it, you might hate it, but some of the political parties now represented in Parliament are actually engaged in enterprise, in the sense that let me get a few MCAs here, a few MPs here, one governor, senator there, so that I can get access to political party funding, and the time of nominations, people will pay my party. So they are in business. It should be strengthened. You members of Parliament who are still there, go and strengthen that so that we have got serious political parties that can compete for presidency. In fact, the only parties that should have access to this fund is one that competes for the presidency and proves that they have competed at that level. So that we move away from these small little parties. I'm not having a Sally on mind, but he's having himself on mind, because his target is usually to get MPs in Bungoma and in Trans Nzoia. You know, you can't believe it. Even during the NASA negotiations, we had negotiations within negotiations. The negotiation Eseli and I were in then paved way to other negotiations where Raila and Mudavadi and Wetangula then shared out regions that you will control this, I control this. So as we went into the election, some of us didn't know we had been auctioned.
Right.
Just to answer you, I'm reluctant to enter that where Boni Khalwale is going, because to the best of my recollection, the biggest stumbling blocks to the negotiation of candidature in what was broadly called NASA was Dr. Khalwale and former Senator Hassan in Mombasa.
Indeed.
Because
yes.
they believed Boni Khalwale could not fathom a situation where he cedes any ground to Oparanya.
Yes.
And Hassan would not fathom any ground in which he would cede any ground to Joho.
Yes.
And therefore the idea of having joint candidature scuttled on that account. And so I thought that Boni would be doing a confession rather than a lamentation. But I don't want to go there. I want to answer your question.
Yes.
Whether there is a bill that seeks to deal with this. To the best of my knowledge, what there is a report.
It's a report. So.
A report of a task force that was basically put together by the Registrar of Political Parties with assistance of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, and which is primarily led by Senator Mwaura in the Senate. And some of us in the National Assembly are involved, including Dr. Chris Wamalwa, including Honorable Mbui, including Ms. Honorable Keter. And just the weekend before last, we were discussing, and it primarily centers around the question of nominations. You know, Article 88.4 requires the IBC to regulate the process by which parties nominate candidates. The initial draft was it required them to conduct. But the thinking around this task force has been that maybe we can improve the quality of the nominations if we create an independent fund. Some of us sought to persuade them that it is political parties don't mess up nominations because of money, but it's because of interest. So we should move towards having the IBC conduct the nominations and ceding the dispute resolution mechanism to another body. The second issue around what it's talking about is an independent fund. Do we need and can we create and can we sustain an independent fund only for nominations? And then thirdly is the question of the extent of regulation. Do you let parties do whatever they want and then you deal with the outcome, or do you control it so that whatever is done is legitimate? So I think that report is yet to be reduced into a bill. It is yet to be agreed on the text of that bill and whether it's to be introduced in the Senate or in the National Assembly. Most likely, because it might involve money, it may have to be initiated in the National Assembly. But that's where it is for now.
Right, thank you.
But
finally, with the Jacob video.
Just 1 second, just 30 seconds. You know, I agree with Bonnie. I opposed that recommendation. I am surprised that Dr. Chris Wamalwa's name is not being mentioned.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Because he's the one who said he wanted monies to be shared by these briefcase parties. You know, Ford Kenya is not a small party. Ford Kenya was the Jaramogi party. It was the national party. But it has been reduced to Abukusu party. Why should we fund it?
I think
so if you are let me
just let him finish. Let him finish.
Let me finish. You can do that and tell me if it is not, because when you have these briefcase parties looking for taxpayer money, it is how not to do it. You know, in other democracies, even individuals who are billionaires who want to contest for presidency, they fund their own processes. Here is a political party that goes, even when people are going for nominations, they don't agree that people negotiate. Why do people only negotiate, or why must people only negotiate when it is time to divvy up money? And when people are going so that people can get numbers, you know, the contest between ODM and ANC and Ford Kenya in Western Kenya, that is how Jubilee got an advantage to get that 54% thing. Because Ford Kenya refused, ANC refused. They could have been given. You know, you negotiate. The politics is art of negotiation. That after the fact, after they have no numbers, they want ODM money. That to me, I think, is a very wrong thing. Money is not divided amongst coalitions.
Thank you.
Money is for political parties.
Correct.
Right.
I think I know you have said something very critical, which I need to
We wind up with you because we've got a lot to cover
Because
ahead.
I don't think Jakoyo is right to say that Ford Kenya is a Bukusu party. Just the same way ODM has got majority Luos, is the same way that Ford Kenya has got majority Bukusus. Every party has a stronghold. But Ford Kenya has got representation up to coast. So I don't know why he's saying that Ford Kenya is a Bukusu party. We have MPs in Kisii. Are those Bukusus? Or we are now trying to baptize Olago Oluoch a Bukusu? You know, I think there is something. People fear Ford Kenya because Ford Kenya has got an outreach throughout the country.
Are you serious?
Yes.
All right.
And they fear Ford Kenya.
Thank you.
If Ford Kenya actually got funding.
Thank you. We're not here to hold brief for
Ford
our
Kenya
parties.
got funding.
No, thank you.
People like ODM will
Thank
be the
you.
loser.
Thank
And
you.
that's why Jakoyo can say such nasty words.
Thank you. Let's wrap it. Let's wrap it and go back to
You know,
just a moment.
independents are more than Ford Kenya MPs.
And
All right.
you
Thank
as
you.
part of the cause, you made us lose Kakamega by your misbehavior in Kakamega.
No, Kakamega was
thank you.
auctioned.
No, he misbehaved in Kakamega. He made us lose
think,
seats.
Okay, just a moment. No.
In all fairness,
He went campaigning
when
our
you want to
candidates.
have a discussion about Ford Kenya, do that when Eseli is not on the show.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you
leader.
could fly over this side and start matching. But you must you must disengage yourself from.
When we are discussing Poland.
Right, thank you.